So what I want to do now is to move into a discussion about chapter 12 and introduce this chapter to you. I'm not going to go through everything today, but I'm going to go through some things today that I want to make sure we keep moving forward a little bit. When we talk about what's in chapter 12, we're talking about differential analysis, and that is making a decision between two different possibilities. For this is the PowerPoint for chapter 12, and I'm going to go through some of these. And I'm going to begin with some of the basic information that we have in this chapter. One of the things that we talk about in differential analysis is identifying the differences between two options that we have. So in this first learning objective, we want to identify relevant and irrelevant costs and benefits. We're really not looking for a comparison between costs that are not relevant to a decision. When we say relevant costs, we want the cost that will change when we make a different decision. Irrelevant costs are costs that we should ignore when we make those decisions. And then when we do an analysis that's based on differential analysis, we want to look at the future. We want to focus on the future costs and benefits and how that will differentiate itself between two possible options or alternatives. And then one key point here, sunk costs are always irrelevant if we're looking at alternatives. And a sunk cost is a cost that we've already paid for, it's already been incurred, and making a different decision will not change whether that cost has already been incurred or not. Then concept number 5 here is that future costs and benefits that don't differ between each other are not relevant to our decision making. What we want to focus on are those incremental changes between the decision. So if one decision doesn't really change certain costs, then that's not going to be relevant to the decision. What will be irrelevant are those costs that change between two options. And then finally, opportunity costs need to be considered as well. And an opportunity cost is a cost of something we're giving up, something we could have done with the space. So if we're looking at floor space in a store and we say, okay, we can either use this space for these kind of products or those kind of products. Now, if we use it for, let's say you're in a grocery store, if I use it for produce, I'm going to make X number of dollars. But if I switch it over to frozen food, I'm giving up the dollars I would have made as a produce department. So we want to look at that and say, okay, the dollars you give up that you could have earned as a produce department are opportunity costs. Okay. So when we look at relevant costs, we're really going to look at these differences that occur. So this is one where Cynthia is considering visiting her friend in New York. She can drive or take the train, and if she drives, it's 230 miles to her friend's apartment. Now she's trying to decide which alternative is less expensive and has gathered the following information. She has the straight line depreciation on the car, the cost of gasoline, annual cost of auto insurance and license, um, maintenance and repairs, and parking fees at the school. And basically, she's taken those costs and divided those out on a cost per mile, and she's basing that on 10,000 miles that she drives per year. So, by the way, this 10-cent cost per mile for gasoline is based on $2.70 per gallon divided by 27 miles per gallon. Parking, $45 a month for 8 months. You're going to divide that out by the 10,000 miles. You get 0.036. So these are her uh, costs that she's identified associated with her car. Now we need to figure out, okay, what really is relevant. So there's some additional information here. If she drives the car per mile, there's going to be some reduction in resale value. The round trip train fare is $104. What are the benefits of relaxing during the train trip? Um, there's some cost associated with putting her dog in a kennel while she travels. Um, what is the benefit of having the car in New York? Well, we really don't know that. And what's the hassle of parking the car in New York worth or going to cost you? We don't know that. We know that the per day cost of parking is $25 a day, but we don't know some of these are unknown variables. So we're going to identify the relevant costs and benefits that are associated with it. The cost of the car is not relevant to the decision. She already paid for that. It's going to be incurred whether she goes or not, so that's not relevant. The cost of insurance is also not relevant. She'll have that cost whether she takes the train or not. However, the cost of gasoline is relevant. Um, Also, if she takes the train, she would avoid the cost of that gasoline, but also the cost of parking and things like that. Also, incurring additional costs for maintenance based on the number of miles is relevant, um, and they depend on how many miles you drive. Now, the cost of parking her car at the school is not relevant because it's going to be paid whether she drives or takes the train, regardless. So, some of the costs are relevant and others are not. Um, by the way, the decline in resale value for driving the car the additional miles is relevant. The round trip train fare is relevant as well. The kennel cost is not relevant because whether she drives the car or takes the train, she'll still have to put the dog in a kennel. And relaxing on the train is relevant, even though you can't really identify a dollar value for that. You know, that's an intangible. You just have to factor that in, how important that is to you. And then the cost of parking in New York is relevant, and the benefits of having the car and problems associated with it are both relevant, but you can't really quantify those. It's hard to. So here are the relevant costs of driving. Okay, we've decided, all right, this is going to be based on her calculations earlier. She's going to have 460 miles that she drives. Gasoline will cost her 10 cents a mile. That means $46 for the trip. Maintenance is going to be 460 miles, and we're going to factor that by the calculation she had earlier. Reduction in resale, we're going to factor that by the miles driven. And then the parking in New York City for 2 days, which is going to be $50. We add those costs up and we get the total cost of driving is $137.86. The relevant cost of taking the train is $104. So if you're looking at the differential between these two, it's $33.86 cheaper to take the train than it is to drive the car. Now, the intangible decision making that you have to factor in here is how does relaxing on the train relate to the, the convenience of having the car available in New York or the hassle of finding a place to park it. So when we look at these differential analyses, we look at something like this. The management of a company is considering a labor saving machine that rents for $3,000 a year. We have this data about the annual sales and costs with and without the new machine. So here's the current situation. Here's the situation with the machine. We see that basically the direct materials don't change, sales don't change. Direct labor does change. We reduce that cost. And then we have the increased rent on the new machine, which is a reduction of the savings from labor. Now we're looking at the differential costs and benefits. We're looking at the things that are different. So we save 15,000, but we spend 3,000 more. So we have uh, a net increase in operating income of 12,000 with the new machine. So we can analyze. We could prepare financial statements side by side like this all the time, but really what we want to do in this chapter is to focus on these costs that differ between decisions. Okay, you can use the differential approach because sometimes it's very difficult to have enough information to put together a full income statement. And by the way, sometimes if we're looking at irrelevant cost and relevant cost together, there may be some confusion. We may get it mixed up. And we may not have exactly the right comparison. Okay, so one of the key things here is to decide whether a business or product line gets dropped or added. When we talk about that, uh, we're going to assess the impact of dropping that business line. Now, we did this some in chapter 6 when we were looking at whether to drop or with a performance, a segment analysis of a business line, of a business segment. So here's a problem. It says, due to the declining popularity of digital watches, Lovell Company's digital watch line hasn't reported a profit for several years. They're considering whether to keep it or drop it. So here's what it said. Here's what we need to think about. We should only drop the digital watch segment if the profit would increase. So what we're going to do is compare a contribution margin that would be lost if the digital watch line was discontinued to the fixed expenses that would be avoided if the line was discontinued. So if we can discontinue some fixed costs, we're interested in that, but we also want to remember, okay, we're going to lose some contribution margin. So here's a segment income statement for the digital watches. Notice we have 300,000 in commissions or in contribution margin, not commissions. We have 300,000 in contribution margin compared to the fixed expense of 400,000 here, and we get a net operating loss of 100,000. Now, they've looked into these costs, and the fixed general factory overhead and fixed general admin costs won't be affected if they drop the digital watch line. So when we drop that line, we're not going to get rid of those costs. They'll still be there. Fixed general factory overhead and general administrative expenses that are assigned to the product would then be allocated to other product lines. So, should Lovell retain or drop the digital watch segment? Let's look at an analysis. So we want to start with, okay, what are we giving up here? We're going to lose the contribution margin of 300,000. Now we have a list of fixed costs we can avoid, but some of those fixed costs can't be avoided, and if they can't be avoided, they don't go into the analysis. So we list what we can avoid here, and we compare the lost contribution margin to the costs that are given up. And what we look at here is we have a financial disadvantage because we're losing more contribution margin than we are cost. Therefore, we would not want to do this, okay? We would not want to drop that business segment. We could also look at comparative income statements, and this is the one thing that we were talking about earlier. This involves more, and I think sometimes can be somewhat confusing maybe, but looking at this comparative income statement, we're going to lose $300,000 in contribution margin if we drop the line. On the other hand, we would have both general factory overhead of 60,000. We would give up the salary of the product line manager. The depreciation is a sunk cost, so that's not comparable. We would have some advertising costs here that would remain. We'd have rent for the factory space that would remain. When we look at these components, we can see we come up with the same solution here. And we say, okay, we're going to lose net 40,000 from the bottom line if we give up this product line. It's going to be worse without it than it is with it. That's what I'm saying. One of the things that we're looking at here are these fixed allocated costs, and that's why it's not advantageous to drop this product line. And that's what common fixed costs are, okay? We looked at the common fixed costs in chapter 6 when we did a segment analysis. So if we have unavoidable common fixed costs, um, they may make the product line look unprofitable, but in reality, dropping the product line would actually decrease the overall net income because we lose that contribution margin. It helps cover some of these common costs. All right, so I want to kind of stop here with this lecture today. I do have an example problem, a demonstration problem, but I would rather wait on that and actually do that on Friday. So we will have a couple of those on Friday. I'll finish the lecture on Friday. And again, if you have any questions about any of this, let me know. I'll certainly be glad to respond to you and answer your questions. Take care and have a great day.